All right, welcome. Thank you all for joining. I'm going to take a minute and go over the obligatory housekeeping reminders. As you may have just heard, we are recording this program and a link will be posted on the website later this week. My goal is, I hope by Wednesday. So I'm going to mute everybody. You will have the option to unmute yourselves. While you can watch on gallery view, you can also choose speaker view from the top right corner of your screen, and we're going to be pinning some speakers later on. There will be an opportunity throughout for Q&A, and if you need any technical help, please send me a chat, let me know. I will do my best to help you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Laura Ralph and spotlight Laura.
Thank you, Erin. I'm Laura Ralph, administrator of the Akron Summit Council on Holocaust and Genocide Education. It's my honor this afternoon to introduce to you our speaker on the topic Lessons of the Holocaust, Undeniable Stories of Survival, Dr. Bradley Beach, PhD. We are very grateful to have an expert like Dr. Beach guide us through a review of this subject. In May of 2021, Dr. Beach retired as a professor of philosophy at Walsh University. His academic experience includes teaching undergraduate courses on genocide and mass murder. Additionally, his research includes multiple genocide studies from the Armenian genocide to the current escalating repression of the Uyghur minority by the Chinese government. He has traveled to northern Uganda to meet with survivors of mass atrocities, examining the consequences of the genocide against the Acholi people. Dr. Beach is also well-versed in studying the Holocaust. He has collaborated with Professor James Waller, the current director of the Cohen Center of Holocaust and Genocide Studies, and has traveled in Europe, visiting genocide-related sites that include the extermination camp at Auschwitz-Birkenau in Poland. For the past 8 years, he served on the board of the Ohio Council for Holocaust and Genocide Education, and most recently he was appointed by Governor DeWine to serve on the newly created Holocaust and Genocide Memorial and Education Commission. Following his lecture, there'll be a question and answer session for Dr. Beach, and information will be shared about this year's Akron Summit Holocaust Arts and Writing Contest. Without further delay, I'd like to turn things over to Dr. Beach.
Thank you very much. And I'm delighted to be here. I'm going to bring up my PowerPoint quickly here and use that. So let me take just a moment to to get that up. And I guess we can leave that there. There we go. Oh, wait a minute. There we go. I think we have everything going now. I want to take just a moment to thank the Akron Summit Council on Holocaust and Genocide Education for inviting me to participate today in this event. I'd also like to thank Ms. Laura Ralph for all of her help in setting this up and making things possible. Your theme, obviously, is Lessons of the Holocaust, Undeniable Stories of Survival. And I think it's a really important title and topic. I'm delighted that that's actually the title that you've chosen to use this year. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. As was indicated, sorry. There we go. I am Brad Beach, and I have been a professor of philosophy at Walsh, as well as a professor of peace studies. And today I want to talk to you some about genocide and the nature of genocide, and the consequences of genocide, and relate it to your topic here, undeniable stories. Please feel free throughout the conversation to ask questions that you might have. I'm happy to try to answer those. And again, as was indicated, we'll also have a question and answer period at the end. But if you'd like to jump in at certain points and ask a question, I'm happy to try to answer those questions during the presentation. In 1918, U.S. Senator Hiram Johnson, a senator from California, was purported to have said that the first casualty of war is the truth. And it occurs to me that one of the first casualties of genocide certainly is the truth. Genocide begins with disinformation, deliberately spreading false information, deliberately creating false narratives in order to engage in the process of genocide. And so in one sense, in one very real sense, the first casualty of genocide is the truth. In looking at genocide, there are very predictable stages in the process. And I want to talk about these stages and how they're interconnected, but also how truth is always one of the casualties here in the process. In conducting genocide, the first stage involves targeting a particular group, tribe, race, religious group, and to use them, blame them, scapegoat them for the problems or difficulties that we're currently facing, so that whatever those problems might be, economic problems, political issues, social issues, whatever, those difficulties are usually attributed to and blamed upon one particular group. And this is really the beginning of the process of genocide, targeting and scapegoating a particular group of people. The next stage involves marginalizing this group and dehumanizing them. We deny their humanity. We make them or try to indicate that they're less than us, inferior to us, less than human. And we begin to demonize this group of people, usually using degrading terminology, referring to them as dogs or as pigs, as cockroaches, or monkeys, or vermin. And this process of demonizing, dehumanizing is part of this process of genocide. And then the next stage or step in genocide involves polarization and separation, separating us from them, creating a cleavage between those who we want to target and ourselves, creating, as it were, the other, and separating them from us, distinguishing between us and them. The fourth step or stage that happens in genocide is the process of disenfranchisement, taking away a people's voice by taking away their votes, their ability to vote, taking away their other rights as well. And then the confiscation of their land, their property, their possessions, and eventually taking away their identity and their culture as well. This inevitably leads to the displacement of these people. Once we take away their land, their property, their possessions, we force them to move, to leave, and then eventually to deport them, to place them into concentration camps, or what we call them today refugee camps, but they are essentially concentration camps. And those concentration camps oftentimes eventually become extermination camps. That is disenfranchisement, confiscation of possessions, displacement, and deportation inevitably leads to extermination. The final stage, or the final step in genocides, and this is always the case, there's always the final step in genocide is to deny that the genocide has occurred, to cover up the crimes that we've committed or that have been committed, to destroy the evidence used in committing the crimes, and intimidating the witnesses who can speak about what transpired or what happened, to prevent that information from being shared in the future. If you look at these 5 stages of genocide, one of the things that stands out in the process is that throughout these stages, truth is distorted and truth is denied. There are lies about the other. There are lies about the dangers. There are lies about the outcomes. And in the end, there are even lies about what happened. Genocide is driven by lies and disinformation. This deliberate attempt, when I talk about disinformation, I mean a deliberate attempt to create a false narrative, to create information to confuse, to deny, to create, again, a false understanding of what happened. And I think for me, as I was thinking about these remarks today, it brought back to me the importance of your theme this year, the undeniable stories of survival. The undeniable stories of survival, that these stories of survival of the Holocaust there will always be a segment in society that will deny that they took place. And it is important, it is essential to challenge and to confront those who wish to revise and distort history, to create, once again, a false narrative, a false story about what happened or what didn't happen, and who was at fault. There are, and certainly you probably know this as well as anyone, there are those today in the United States attacking the truth, who are creating disinformation, creating false narratives for both political advantage and political power. And one of those areas, one of those places where this is happening is in attacking certain migrants or refugees around the globe, and certainly in the United States of America. Lies are spread, disinformation is disseminated, divisions are created, scapegoating, dehumanizing, demonizing of refugees and migrants is going on today. And I think in a very real sense, our country is inching towards genocide. We can see the stages sort of transpiring, and this is not new. This has been going on for a very long time. This attempt to subvert the truth has a deep and long history for us. The Evian Conference of 1938 was convened in Evian, France, to address the growing Jewish refugee crisis in Europe as the Nazis expanded their territory in Germany and grew the German Empire. There were more and more and more refugees, Jewish refugees. And Hitler claimed at the time that if nations would accept these criminals, as he called them, if nations would accept these criminals, he would help them to leave. 32 nations participated in the Evian Conference of 1938. All but one refused to accept more refugees into their countries. The only one that agreed to take in more refugees was the Dominican Republic. Every other nation refused, and their reasons for doing it sound very familiar to us. We're hearing the same sort of rhetoric today. They were concerned about the economic impact of taking on these people, that it was going to cost them. They were going to eat up the nation's resources by providing help to them. They were concerned that these refugees would take jobs away from their own people. And they were afraid of racial imbalance within their society. And make no mistake, they're concerned about racial imbalance by allowing these people into their countries. And so the result of the Evian Conference of 1938 is that the nations refuse to help the Jewish refugees. And as a result of that, we have over 6 million Jews murdered, exterminated by the Nazis. The Holocaust is one of many genocides in the modern period, at the modern time, the 20th century, the 21st century. We can trace modern genocides back to the Armenian genocide of 1915 to 1917, a genocide by the Ottoman Empire against the Christian Armenian minority. And it's estimated that 1.5 million Armenians were killed by the Turks. They were put into forced marches, marched into the Syrian desert, women, children, infirmed, and left there to die, fundamentally. The men were immediately killed. They were forced into as sex slaves and raped. Their property was taken, their possessions were taken, their identities were taken. And this Armenian genocide had a profound impact upon an individual named Raphael Lemkin. Raphael Lemkin was a Polish Jew who was trained in the law. He was a legal expert. He became a professor and an advocate. And Raphael Lemkin in the 1930s made a plea to the League of Nations based upon the Armenian genocide to create an international law outlawing the crime of barbarity, because there was no other way to refer to it. There was no name given. to this particular crime of destroying an entire race or group of people. And eventually, Lemkin will create the name genocide. Genocide is the product of Raphael Lemkin and his work in this area. It's made up of two roots. The Greek word genos, meaning tribe or race or family, and the Latin root side, referring to killing, to kill. And so genocide refers to killing an entire race or tribe or group of people. And it's Raphael Lemkin who was responsible for creating this term, introducing the term, in order to address the issue globally, to make an international law preventing and outlawing and prosecuting those who engage in this process. Lemkin, most of Lemkin's family will be killed in the Holocaust. Lemkin himself narrowly escapes the Nazis in Poland in 1939, eventually makes his way to the United States. And he's instrumental in drafting for the UN what comes to be called the Convention on the Prevention and the Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. Lemkin is the one who drafts this, who spends his life working to have this this genocide convention adopted by the world powers. Comes to be called the Genocide Convention, and it is adopted by the UN on December 9th, 1948, and will finally be ratified by enough nations in the UN to be ratified on January 12th, 1951. In the Genocide Convention, we find a definition of genocide, and I want to share a little bit about this definition with you. Article 2 of the Genocide Convention states this, that in the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in part or in whole a national, ethnical, racial, and religious group. Killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. I think what stands out here is to note that genocide is not just killing. Genocide is not just about numbers and the numbers of deaths. Genocide has to do with, once again, destroying a group's identity, to take away their lands, their possessions, their culture, their traditions, and even their children. Where recently we've been reading about the discovery of the bodies of indigenous people, both in Canada and the United States, indigenous children who were taken from their families by the Canadian government and by the United States government, put into schools, denied the opportunity to practice their traditions, to speak their language, to dress in their native dress. And through neglect and punishment, many of these children ended up dying in these schools. these are attempts at genocide, at taking away the very identity of a group of people. And this, in Article 2, this idea is put forward that genocide is more than just murdering people. Certainly, that's the ultimate end of it. But it's also meant to again disenfranchised, to marginalize, to brutalize, and to take away who they are and how they understand themselves and their identities. That too is part of this understanding of genocide in Article 2 here of the Genocide Convention. The United States refuses to ratify the Genocide Convention. And it refuses to ratify the Genocide Convention because of two reasons. One, it's afraid of losing its sovereignty, and it's afraid that it will be accused of genocide itself, genocide against both Native Americans and against African Americans. And so the United States refuses to ratify the Genocide Convention in 1951. Senator William Proxmire from the state of Wisconsin vows to get the Genocide Convention ratified by the Senate. And he will give a series of speeches. In fact, every time that the Senate is in session, he will make a speech calling for the ratification of the Genocide Convention. And between 1967 and 1986, roughly almost 20 years, Senator William Proxmire gave a speech every time the Senate was in session, calling for the Senate to ratify the Genocide Convention. In the end, he gave 3,211 speeches calling for the Senate to ratify the Genocide Convention. Finally, on February 11th, 1986, the US Senate does ratify the Genocide Convention. And on November 5th, 1988, President Ronald Reagan will sign the bill, with the US then ratifying the Genocide Convention. We might think this is some sort of moral victory for the United States. It is far from that. The reason Reagan signed the bill was for political purposes, not for moral purposes or purposes of justice. And the Senate fundamentally had gutted the bill, the Genocide Convention. It refuses to recognize various aspects of the convention, once again, to protect United States sovereignty. And in the end, to this very day, the United States cannot bring charges of genocide against another nation simply because it refuses to accept most of the parts of the Genocide Convention. So this is actually not a great victory for the United States. In some senses, William Proxmire sort of failed in his attempts to get the Genocide Convention passed, but in the end, it was indeed ratified by the United States. Currently, the International Criminal Court is where individuals are prosecuted for crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of genocide. It was established, the International Criminal Court, ICC, was established by the Rome Statute of 1998. It is in The Hague, in the Netherlands. And as I was indicating, it is this organization that prosecutes individuals for crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. There are a number of modern genocides. There have been a number of genocides since the Armenian genocide. I want to highlight just a few of them. One, of course, is the Armenian genocide that I had mentioned earlier, between 1915 and 1917. It's estimated again that 1.5 million Armenians were murdered in the process of this genocide. There's the Ukrainian genocide called the Holodomor, carried out by Stalin between 1932 and 1933. Here it's estimated somewhere between 7 and 10 million people starved to death because of Stalin's taking of their food for purposes of feeding the Russian population. And in all of these cases, it's always estimated. It's very difficult to get precise numbers with regards to who was killed, who was displaced, who was deported, etc. Of course, the Holocaust in 1941 to 1945, it's estimated that 11 million people were murdered in the Holocaust. That the East Timor genocide between 1975 and 1995, carried out by the nation of Indonesia. The United States has been very careful not to criticize Indonesia because they were considered a vital partner of the United States in Southeast Asia when the United States was attempting to keep communism from spreading through Southeast Asia. And so the United States, Australia, and Canada have refused to recognize the genocide in East Timor by Indonesia. It's estimated that between 200 and 300,000 people were killed in the process. The Cambodian genocide between 1975 and 1979, an estimated 1.5 to 3 million people murdered by the Cambodian government of Pol Pot. The Rwandan genocide between April 7th and July 15th of 1994. And in the Rwandan genocide, it's estimated that between 500,000 to 1 million Tutsis were murdered by the Hutu in Rwanda. And the Bosnian genocide taking place between July 11th and 13th in 1995. Once again, it's estimated that there were approximately 8,000 people who were murdered in the Bosnian Muslims murdered by the Serbs in this short period in July 11th to the 13th. Currently, there are ongoing genocides that are happening as we speak today. The Syrian genocide between 2011 and the present, it is estimated that about 500,000 people have been killed, and that to date, about 6.7 million refugees there are 6.7 million refugees from the Syrian genocide and 6.2 million internally displaced people in Syria. There's the Rohingya genocide in Myanmar in, again, 2015 to the present. It's estimated that about 24,000 people, Rohingya, have been killed. There are believed to be about 700,000 displaced persons, mainly in Bangladesh. The fear is that Bangladesh in the next year or two will dismantle the concentration camps and force the Rohingya back to Myanmar, and that many more will be killed as a result of that. There's the Yazidi genocide occurring between 2014 and the present, and a genocide carried out, started by the group ISIS. It's estimated that 5,000 have been murdered, that there are approximately 500,000 refugees around the world, Yazidis around the world, as a result of this particular genocide. The Darfur genocide in Sudan, 2007 to the present. Again, it's estimated that about 500 people have been killed, that there are approximately 100,000 refugees, mainly located in neighboring Chad, and once again in refugee camps or concentration camps. And then, as was mentioned earlier, the Uyghur genocide in China, the Muslim minorities, Uyghur people, 2014 to the present. And frankly, there are no adequate numbers. It's hard to know exactly how many have been killed in the process, how many have been displaced, deported. There certainly is re-education camps where Uyghurs are being, once again, stripped of their identity, stripped of their culture, stripped of their beliefs. And this too is an ongoing genocide. So we can see the process of genocide continues throughout, from the beginning of the 20th century throughout the 21st century. The process of genocide continues to go on. When it comes to the agents of genocide, that is to say those individuals who are involved in the process of genocide, there are specific groups. There are, first of all, the perpetrators of genocide. Obviously, those people who actively promote and engage in genocide. There are also those who are called bystanders, and bystanders are people who, as the name indicates, stand by and do nothing to prevent genocide, but allow the genocide to happen. And often individuals move between these two groups. That is, people will act as bystanders for a while, and then they will move and become perpetrators of genocide, and then perhaps move back to bystanders, or vice versa. They'll be perpetrators, and then they will become bystanders in their actions, and then once again resort to becoming a perpetrator. There's a lot of movement here in these two groups in genocide, moving back and forth between being a bystander who does nothing to prevent it, the genocides, and being a perpetrator, one who actively engages in the process of genocide. The third group associated with actors involved in genocide are what are known as upstanders. And upstanders are people who actively work to prevent or stop genocide. They used to be referred to as rescuers. The name seemed at certain points inappropriate. They don't always succeed, for example, in rescuing. Oftentimes, those upstanders who tried to prevent the genocides from happening get caught up and are deported with those that they're attempting to protect. And it's rarely the work of one individual. It's usually a network of people who are involved in this process of being upstanders, who are standing up and preventing or stopping genocide from happening. Excuse me. In talking with students about genocide, one of the questions that inevitably comes up is, what can I do to be an upstander? And I want to take a few moments to talk a little bit about how we can be upstanders, how we can help our students if we're talking with students about standing up and to be an upstander. How can we do that? The first thing I would say in terms of being an upstander is simply don't believe the lies. Work to know, work and strive to for understanding. It is obviously there's a lot of disinformation out there, especially on social media sites, as well as unfortunately even news sites and news organizations, media. So there has to be this this need on our parts to work to know and to find the lies, to recognize the misinformation, the false narratives, and to strive to understand the nature of what the truth is. And so, I would say all of us can start in terms of being an upstander by simply refusing to believe the lies that are perpetrated around us. Second, I would say to individuals, don't engage in bullying. This idea of degrading and demonizing and marginalizing individuals is an ongoing process and involves this sort of bullying. It is important for us to respect the dignity of the person and to simply be kind. Kindness and compassion are, I think, essential to the character of the upstander. And so the second thing I would encourage you to emphasize with regards to students being upstanders is simply to not engage in the bullying that oftentimes goes on. And I would say then next, do be accepting and do be tolerant. I think it's important that we're willing to listen to opposing perspectives, that we are open to allowing people to express their opinions. That doesn't mean that we're going to agree with those views, but allow people to have a voice, allow individuals to share their thoughts, and give them space to hold views and beliefs and to act in ways that are different than yours, your ways and your beliefs and your customs, etc. I would say do work for fairness and for justice. Speak up and speak out when they hear the lies, when they watch the bullying. They can be encouraged to speak up and to speak out against it, and to work then for justice. And then finally, I would say what's important in terms of being an upstander is to speak for those without a voice. That is, empower those who have been stripped of their power, and to give voice to those who have been marginalized by others in society. These are all things I think that can be emphasized as important parts of being an upstander. And I would say, these are things I would encourage our students to participate in, to do these sorts of things as a way of being an upstander. I want to end my remarks today by looking at a comment by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King said this, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And some of the things that we've talked about, that I've talked about today, might cause you to question that idea. Is the arc of the moral universe bending towards justice or not? But I think there are really two important aspects of what Dr. King has said here that we need to keep in mind. The first, of course, is the idea that achieving justice is going to take a long time. It's a very slow process. It's a slow, but as he indicates, inexorable process, that the arc of the moral universe does indeed bend towards justice. It is long, but in the end, it bends towards justice. And the second thing I think that's important about this statement is that he implies that we are essential in making the moral universe bend to justice, that it doesn't do it on its own, it doesn't do it naturally, but that we are essential to that process of the moral universe bending towards justice. And so I would encourage you to recognize these two ideas, that justice may take a very, very long time. Justice will not be, complete justice will not be achieved in our lifetime, but that we can be agents in making the universe bend towards justice. Thank you for letting me share these ideas with you, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have with regards to what I've talked about today.
Professor Beach, you talked about the bystanders and the upstanders. Some of the readings indicate there are a number of people who, during the Nazi Holocaust, refused to believe. They weren't bystanders, they weren't upstanders, they weren't participants. It was sort of just, they refused to believe this was going on. Mm-hmm. Include that category of people. Is that just a myth? Or do you think, does everybody fall into the bystander situation?
I think that's a really good question, and I'm not sure whether those who refuse to believe that the Holocaust was taking place would be labeled as simply bystanders who did nothing to prevent it, or perpetrators of those who actively participated in it. I would make the case that in a very real sense, they're perpetrators, because by refusing to believe it, they're allowing the genocide, the Holocaust, to continue. And so in that sense, I think it's fair to identify them as perpetrators rather than bystanders. And as I indicated, people seem to go between the two groups.
I can say something?
Sure.
I don't know that there were so many people that denied or that wouldn't believe it during the happening of it. There were huge numbers of people who closed their eyes to it, mm-hmm. and absolutely, refused to talk about it. And we can't underestimate the level of anti-Semitism in both Germany and Austria, as well as in the United States. I'm a docent at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in DC. And there were a few things. I agree with everything that you said about genocide. Very valid. And all of the genocides that you mentioned, and there happens to be a Burma exhibit right now in the museum, which is fabulous. But this is billed as how you teach the Holocaust. And I think you didn't address the buildup, the rise of the Nazis. You mentioned the categories, but I think there's so many people, particularly students in high school and college, that really don't know anything about the Holocaust. I conduct tours at the Holocaust Museum, and it never ceases to amaze me how few people know. So I just think in teaching it, you have to use examples of what was going on. Yeah, sure, there are the categories. I mean, a lot of the things you mentioned, but I think you need to use the examples before the Evian conference, for example, how it evolved, how it developed.
Mhm.
And the only thing that I think was lacking in presenting is actually talking about the Holocaust per se, which was truly one of the worst happenings ever.
Yeah.
Not in terms so much as how many people died, but how if you were Jewish, it didn't matter anything about you. Also, the children, you mentioned that children in genocides are often convinced to go to other groups, or in the Holocaust, 1.5 million children were killed just because they didn't want to perpetuate the race, which happens in a lot of these other genocides, but it was deliberate. And the kids that were housed by families, and kept them alive because they were told that they were Christian or they were taught to be Christians, that's a different story. It's the Nazis were out to destroy, to kill as many babies and as many children as possible. So I'm just saying some of it has to be addressed directly about the Holocaust. That's my only issue.
Okay.
I don't want to talk too much, but I think I did.
No, fair enough. I think some of the things that you're interested in terms of examples could certainly be brought out, especially with regards to the Holocaust. When I talked about the stages of genocide, there are very clear and I think obvious examples from the Holocaust where you can see each of these kinds of things happening to the Jewish people in Germany and other parts of Europe as the genocidal activities of the Nazis progressed. They're going through those various stages. They're engaging in these kinds of things, and there are, as you point out, there are plenty of examples of that taking place in the Holocaust. And yes, the Holocaust is the ultimate example of genocide. It stands apart from all other genocides because of the nature of how this genocide took place. And so we sort of give it its own terminology, even by calling it the Holocaust rather than simply another instance of a genocide, because of the nature of this particular genocide. So I agree with what you said.
Are the step-by-steps for the other genocides similar to the step-by-step? I think that's what Judy was talking about. The step-by-step process, how we got from discrimination and hate to a Holocaust with other genocides, is the similar kind of process, or are each distinct and have different procedures?
They're very similar. If you look at the history of the various genocides, they almost always are following this particular progression between these various stages. They may look a little different. They may happen more quickly or more slowly, but inevitably they go through this same sort of process.
I agree. Excuse me for interrupting, but this was billed as how to teach the Holocaust. And you taught a very perfect lesson on the evolvement of genocide. And Lemkin absolutely is the one that coined the phrase. However, you said at the very end of your discussion about Lemkin that his entire family in Poland was wiped out. He was the only survivor. And I think that I think it should have been said first. And I think that was more of a motivation to coin the word genocide than just the fact that, the UN and everything else.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Lemkin was interested in genocide before the Holocaust began. I mean, it was the Armenian genocide that sort of sparked him and it sparked his interest in it. Although obviously the Holocaust had a tremendous impact upon him personally, as you pointed out. I think only he
He
and his
didn't coin
brother
the phrase
survived.
until he lost his family,
That's
even
true.
though he definitely was upset about the Armenian
Right.
genocide. And you know something, one of the things, we used to have a panel in the permanent exhibit at the museum about the Armenian genocide. And because there's so much information that was found to be exaggerated or less exaggerated, they took the panel down. Because although we talk in giving tours about other genocides, it's just that the truth of the Holocaust needs to be conveyed. And I think these people that are visiting the museum and these students that are learning about the Holocaust, you know, need to know direct information about the Holocaust. And I just would have liked that to be more emphasized.
Okay. Sorry, I'm also reading, there's some questions in the chat and I want to also identify those too, talk about those. Christine Burke is asking about the length of time of a genocide, and then talking about the genocide of African Americans is ongoing. Would I agree with that notion? And yeah, I mean, that the United States had every right to fear that they would be accused of genocide when it came to African Americans in the United States, and how they were enslaved and how they were treated, and how they continue to be treated. So I would say that in some ways, I think one might say that it's an ongoing genocide within the United States, that that's the way the United States has dealt with African Americans and Native Americans seems to be fit the profile, let's put it that way, of a genocide. I don't know if you want to add anything to that or not, but I think that's what I would say with regards to that. And then Amanda Price has asked, she doesn't have a microphone, she says, how do you recommend sharing information like this without losing sight of the topic? The idea of sharing this information leads me to visualize a political discussion taking over rather than students staying focused on the topic of survivors. You know, I think as I was thinking about my comments today, I was thinking how divided our society is and how volatile things are. There are those who take exception to, as it's oftentimes referred to, making people feel bad about themselves. And so I can see how, and I'm not sure I'm answering the question as it was asked, but nevertheless, I could see how, as a teacher, this could become a very difficult topic to try to address with students, simply because it can be viewed as somehow undermining and attacking the United States, and you know, for many people, patriotism is understood as never saying anything negative about the United States. I happen to disagree with that particular conception of patriotism, but nevertheless, you do have those parts in society, segments of society where they do take exception to any sort of negative history of the United States. And honestly, I don't know how to address that other than to simply say these are the facts. This is in point of fact what happened or what is happening in our country. That's probably not very satisfactory, but it is, I think, what we have to admit that the United States has not done a very good job when it comes to these kinds of issues. And again,
I just want to say one more thing. Has anybody read that in the last few days, there's a school system or school in Texas that does not want to have books about the Holocaust in the classroom unless they have opposing books, which, I mean, that just blew me away. I mean, what are opposing books to the Holocaust? You know, Mein Kampf. I mean, that's what's going on in this country. That's why it's so important that this history is known, that, you know, there are teachers that don't want books in the classroom or in the library about the Holocaust unless you have books that are against the Holocaust. I mean, that was just really.
That's not what happened. I'm involved with this.
That's fine.
Let me explain. The school, it was not the teachers, it was the administration who interpreted a Texas law incorrectly that said you had to have an even-handed approach to controversial topics. And the statement was that the Holocaust was controversial. Today, this morning, late last night and this morning, they issued a new statement indicating that interpretation that you should not teach the Holocaust was an improper interpretation. That the Holocaust itself is not controversial. It occurred, it existed, and the books were fine. But the reason for that is the scary part. The reason for that are 14 states have passed laws that have said, 14 school districts or states have passed laws that says when you're dealing with a controversial topic, this comes from the Black Lives Matter idea. You have to give the opposite point of view. And I think that's the scary part about that, which is the teacher is going to be forced into a situation where he or she is going to have to make determinations. I think we squelched the one in Texas, but who knows what's going to happen next.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very scary thing, no matter how you interpret that news.
I think we should probably take the last question now and wrap up this part of the Q&A, and then there'll be more Q&A at the end. Also, I don't know if this is a helpful comment or not, but we do have some resources on our website where if people are interested in having survivor stories directly available to their students, there are recordings there. And then those survivors through the Maltz Museum will actually be able to do a Q&A, if I'm understanding correctly, for the classrooms for grades 6 through 12. This is available exclusively to the educators. And so sometimes, and I think this is one of the values of this topic, is that, you know, hearing someone's personal story doesn't have to be a criticism of any country. I mean, they're literally just telling what happened to them. So that might be a way to, you know, get it away from the political side of the discussion a little bit more, because it's just a personal story as opposed to, and you know, and that's one of the values of this topic. So if we want to take Marsha Goldberg's question as the last one for right now. Did you have that one on your screen?
I don't think I do. Sorry.
Okay. It says, given the amount of information available to us, how do we determine what is a lie?
Ah, good. That's a great question. And I can't give you a formula to say, here's how you decide what's a lie and what's truth. And obviously, part of any conversation has to do with the perspectives that we bring to the table. So, but what I think what we can do is emphasize the importance of of using multiple resources rather than just one, looking at a compendium of perspectives. And I think there are certain explanations for why certain narratives are put forward, and those at least have to be, I think, part of that conversation, so that even though we may not come down on one side or the other as to whether or not an election was stolen, we can still talk about why that kind of narrative might be put out there, and what are the implications of those kinds of narratives, et cetera. So I don't have a formula. There isn't a formula that we can use. I mean, that's, as a philosopher, that my job has always been to recognize the complexity of truth and trying to determine what it is, and in the end to be humble enough to say, oh, we don't have the truth, but what we can do is try to clear away the underbrush, clear away what doesn't belong, and hope to move in the direction of truth. And that's about the best I can say with regards to that. And if anybody else has any ideas, I'm happy to consider those as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Beach. Now we're going to switch over to Rini, and she's going to give us some information about the contest, unless there's any last minute questions.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Beach, for taking time to speak with us on this important topic. And my name is Rini Pinsky, and I'm the chairperson of the art portion of the Holocaust Arts and Writing Contest. And recent polls have shown a lack of knowledge of the Holocaust in the younger generation and an increase in Holocaust denial. So through education and our annual writing and arts contest, we hope to enlighten our young people and help ensure that history will never repeat itself. This is the 34th year for our contest in Summit County. The contest is open to all students in grades 6 to 12 residing in Summit County. The entries are judged blindly, so no name should be on the artwork or the written pieces, just on the accompanying entry forms. And the arts and writing winners are selected by jury. But so the rubric and the submission forms all can be found on our website, www.akronsummitholocaust.education.org. And if our monitor can put that up, there it is on the chat. The art pieces chosen will be displayed in the main Akron Summit County Library from April 4th to May 2nd, and on our website. And the winning writing entries were also displayed on the library, scrolling on a monitor. We did this last year and it was very successful and moving, and also on the website. And all the art pieces will be returned to the students. So that's good to know. But over the 30 plus years, many themes have been explored in the Holocaust Arts and Writing Contest. And as you've been told, this year's theme is Lessons of the Holocaust, Undeniable Stories of Survival. So what we're talking about here is really survival stories from the Holocaust. Judges will be looking for pieces that focus on survivors. And if it's from the point of view of a rescuer or an upstander, it should be about telling a story about the survivor. So that would be just as applicable. And the time frame that we're talking about here is the duration of World War II, beginning with Kristallnacht. Students can enter on their own or through their school, and they're divided by grades 6 to 8 is Division 1, and Division 2 is grades 9 to 12, and it'll be judged separately. And there's a winner for each division and each contest of those 4 categories, and students can only enter 1 category. As far as the contest, you have a contest, you have winners, usually cash or cash equivalent prizes will be awarded for first, second, third, and fourth place in each category. They're in recognition of the hard work that was be put into the project. There's also recognition of works that earn an honorable mention designation and recognition on our website. The teachers of our first place winners will also receive a prize. And that's up to $200 to purchase books for their classroom from the suggested resource list. All participants will receive a certificate and an invitation to attend the commemoration. All the details and the entry forms are available on the website. And if you have any questions, please email or call Laura through the contact information listed. And the curated resource list for teachers and the link to support our educational efforts through donations are also on the website. So thank you on behalf of the Akron Council Summit on Holocaust and Genocide Education. And Laura will tell us more about the resource list.
Thank you, Rainey. At this time, I'd like to extend a special thank you to Barb White and Esther Hexter. These extremely knowledgeable women have provided us with resources to help all those who wish to participate in this year's contest bring accurate knowledge to their students, themselves, and others. In past years, they have run this seminar and have a wealth of knowledge about this subject. Barb White, Deputy Director of the Akron Summit County Public Library, has created a selected resource list of Holocaust materials. These resources are available through the Akron Summit County Public Library and geared to this year's theme, Lessons of the Holocaust, Undeniable Stories of Survival. In this list, she has categorized the groups of resources and included books, movies, documentaries, and websites. When entering the Akron Summit Holocaust Arts and Writing Project Contest, these are the resources you should use. Esther Hexter has organized and implemented this seminar for many years. In addition to recruiting Dr. Beach to give our wonderful keynote address today, Esther has provided us with a Holocaust history timeline as it relates to survivors' stories. Thank you to both Barb and Esther for putting so much work and knowledge into preparing these valuable resources. These can also be found on the website along with some resources that Dr. Beach has to augment his talk. I'd now like to pass the virtual microphone over to Akron Summit Holocaust and Genocide Council on Education Board member Nora Glauberman for some closing remarks.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Laura, for the introduction. I've really enjoyed listening to Dr. Beach tonight and being here virtually with all of you. Remembering Holocaust victims and hearing their stories of survival is such an important way to engage students and help bring this important part of our history to life. So thank you, Dr. Beach. Your discussion of genocide was excellent, and we were honored that you chose to join us to speak at the seminar. Before we sign off, I also want to thank the teachers and the other attendees who took time out of your busy schedules to attend tonight. We appreciate that you're making this topic a priority in your teaching, and we look forward to working with you for the annual contest. Lastly, I want to thank the City of Akron under Mayor Daniel Horrigan and the County of Summit under County Executive Eileen Shapiro for their ongoing leadership and financial commitment to this council. We couldn't do what we do without their support. So with that, this concludes the seminar program. We will stay on for a few minutes for additional questions you may have for Dr. Beach or specific questions about the 2021-2022 Arts and Writing Contest. So if you have no additional questions, feel free to sign off at this time. If not, again, we'll keep it open for a little while. And thanks again for attending.
Thank you so much. Very enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Does anyone have any follow-up questions about the contest or about the keynote address?
I'd just like to say hi to my good friend Esther.
Esther, do you want to unmute at all? I'll come unmute you.
I wanted to say hi, Esther, also. It's nice that you got your camera going. Thank you, Dr. Beach.
Thank you.
Brad, what a difficult topic to do on 1 foot. I think that unfortunately what's going on in the United States today makes it even more important that our wonderful teachers keep engaging in what's a human being and how are we supposed to relate to each other. And we have a tremendous number of survivors in the area that are willing, and especially through the Moltz Museum, this idea of being able to work from Zoom if necessary, to watch one of their stories and then have a Zoom session where the students can engage with the person they just heard from. It might be a day or two later. Is very special and very important. And I think that as I've helped teachers teach this over the many years that I've worked on this, I find teachers in the greater Akron-Summit County area an amazing bunch of human beings. They've been doing this for a long time, and without them, the rest of us are not here. And hopefully, as their students grow, they will become fighters for this kind of justice and stand up and say, we can't keep doing this. And right now, it's a particularly difficult time. So teaching through this year, I'm kind of glad I'm on the outside and not in a classroom, but of the teachers that commented briefly, they have been doing this with great skill and sensitivity for many years, and we're lucky to have them. So thanks, Brad, and thanks everybody else.
Okay.
Laura,